So I believe that 2021 to 2030 is going to be the decade of decentralized finance, which means we are going to see all the centralized financial concepts, whether it is the stock market, whether it is insurance, whether it is the banking system, completely moving to a decentralized blockchain based concept.
Thank you for joining Change. I am possibly India's first future tech podcast. I'm your host, Eddie Abu. Today I have with me Mr. Rohas Nagpal. He's India's top blockchain influencer and entrepreneur and an author. He has co-founded the Asian School of Cyber Laws and has assisted the Government of India in framing draft rules and regulations under the Information Technology Act. He's also founded BankChain, a community of 37 banks for exploring, building, and implementing blockchain solution. And he's also the founder of Mera, QR, and Prime Chain. Roas, it's a pleasure and honor to have you on Change and Possibly podcast, a humble effort to give voice to disruptors such as yourself who are shaping the tomorrow. So since you are a crypto evangelist and also the author of the Future Money Playbook, I thought it would be a good start by understanding money. So can you explain to my audience what is money and how did it come into existence?
Sure thing. So when we use this term money, what we are primarily talking about is something which is a medium of exchange, a store of value, and a unit of account. So, if you do the barter system, it's very difficult because you may want something, but I may not have the exact same to offer you in return. So the world realized that we need some kind of a standardized unit which can be used. And if you look at the beginning of mankind, all sorts of things have been used as money, starting from cowrie shells, salt, tobacco, and of course, then the commodities like gold and silver. So this is what was actually called as the commodity money. Then the world moved into the second phase, what we call as the political money. Now, where commodity money is backed by something produced by nature and in limited quantities, political money is something produced by the government and it's unlimited. It's basically paper or very cheap metal which is converted to coins, but the government doesn't really have a restriction on how much they can print. And that is the reason we call it as political money. It is money because the government says it's money. And if you don't listen, then you go to jail for it. So it is called political money. Now, after the invention of Bitcoin, the third kind of money has entered the world, which we call as the math money or the money of mathematics money, where we are not putting our trust in a metal or in a government, but in a mathematical formula. And as long as we see that that formula is unbreakable, well, it creates a completely new form of money. And that's where a Bitcoin becomes an example. Now, the question is, whenever we look at this new kind of money, we have to again ask ourselves those questions. Is Bitcoin, can it be used as a medium of exchange, a store of value, and a measure? And if yes, well, then that's money also.
You explained money beautifully. Now, there is this gentleman called Bernard von Nothaus. He had created an alternative to the US currency called Liberty Dollar. And he was sent to jail because of creating an alternative US dollar. So why is it that only countries and government hold the right to print money? Why isn't there a universal alternative to federal currency?
Sure, very good question. So, in fact, let me very specifically go into what happened to the Liberty Dollar issue. Now, because there is a specific law, under the USC code, there's that under 18 USC 486, the specific section says, whoever, except as authorized by law, makes, utters, or passes any coins of gold or silver or other metal or alloy of metal, and which may be considered to be similar to money. In that case, he could go to jail for 5 years or be made to pay a fine or both. So there is a very specific law which debarred people from doing that. And because he created these gold and silver kinds of coins, he was put into jail for that. So there is a specific section. And in fact, US is not the only country which does that. Let me just read out to you a small part of the Indian law on this. So under section 31 of the RBI Act, it very clearly says that no person in India other than the Reserve Bank of India can make promissory notes payable to the bearer on demand. Now, you may wonder what is the meaning of this. Do you have a currency note in your pocket right now?
Well, yes, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Can you take it out?
Yeah. There you go.
Now, on it, can you see there is a small promise written?
Right. The promissory note.
Can you read it out? Read it out.
Promise to pay the bearer the sum of 10 rupees.
Now my question to you is, what you're holding in your hand, is that 10 rupees?
It's a piece of paper.
Is it 10
yes,
rupees?
Yeah, it is.
No, no. If it was 10 rupees, then why is there a promise saying I will give you 10 rupees? So this is not 10 rupees. Most people don't realize that. When you look at a currency note, it is a promissory note payable to the bearer on demand, issued and signed by the Reserve Bank of India governor. If you look at a 1 rupee note, it does not have a promise, and it is not signed by the RBI, it is signed by the Secretary Ministry of Finance of the Government of India. So the interesting thing you have to realize is what you hold in your hand is not money, it's a promissory note, and there is a specific law in India which says that nobody other than RBI can issue such kind of a promissory note. So if I was to make a note like this and put my photo instead of Gandhiji's, my signature instead of the RBI governor, it would still be a crime. If I was to issue something like this, I have to either mention the name of the person I will pay the money to, or a date, or both. Only the RBI governor can do it without mentioning a date or a person or both. Get it? That's the difference. So every country protects this right through legislation, and that is what puts people into jail if they try to create their own money.
Let's talk about this man called Satoshi Nakamoto, right? So he was the one who came up the vision of creating an alternative to currency. Can you talk a little bit about his vision behind the Bitcoin and the white paper that he authored?
Okay. So now, first of all, we don't know whether it was a man. It could have been a woman.
Exactly.
So it could be he or she. Secondly, it could be a group of people, which I actually believe that's true. Right. It is not one person who did this. It's probably a group of people, and they gave themselves a pseudonym. Right. Now, if you look at the Bitcoin white paper, I would just like to read out one sentence from it, which I feel captures the crux. What it says is that what is needed is an electronic payment system based on cryptographic proof instead of trust, allowing any two willing parties to transact directly with each other without the need for a trusted third party. And that, I believe, captures the crux of what they are trying to do. They are saying that today's money systems relies upon trust. So you trust your government, you trust the banks, you trust these institutions. He says, let's not. Why don't we put our trust into a mathematical formula? And as long as that mathematical formula is not broken, that becomes the source of truth and trust for us. And that is what Bitcoin actually epitomizes. That particular computer algorithm and software, which anybody in the world can check, see the code, try to break it. Once you realize you can't break it, now you trust it. Because when we look at the conventional method, governments can issue as much money as they want. But the computer algorithm of Bitcoin controls it. So as you may be knowing, Bitcoin started off in 2009, and it says that every approximately 10 minutes, one new block is generated, which means initially 50 new Bitcoins were generated every 10 minutes. Every 4 years, this amount of new Bitcoins goes down in half. So from 50, it became 25, 12 and a half. Now it's 6.25. This rate will continue to have till the year 2140 AD, which is more than 100 years to go. And at that time, the total volume of Bitcoin would be 21 million. And no more Bitcoin can ever be created. So that is why we say that it is a non-inflationary currency. Inflation means fall in the value of currency. So when I was in college, I could fill up my entire tank of my motorbike with petrol for 100 rupees. Because petrol was about 10 bucks a liter. Today, it's almost 100 rupees a liter. So what has changed? It's not the petrol which has changed, but it is the value of money. What earlier 10 rupees could buy, today 100 buys. And why does money lose value? Because it's over creation causes inflation. But Bitcoin cannot be created more than these fixed amounts. And that is the fundamental difference between Bitcoin and any other currency.
Going back to the fiat currency, right? So what are the pros and cons, according to you, of fiat currency? And how does a country print or produce money?
So now the pros, if you look at, is that whenever the government needs to increase the liquidity into the market, it can push more currency out. When it wants to decrease it, it can buy back its own currency. That's what the government and the RBI do through all the various treasury bonds. So the biggest pro would be the ability to generate when required, let's say for infrastructure development or other thing. But then there is a very big con that comes with it, that there is no backing. So, a lot of people believe that money or fiat currency is backed by gold. Do you also believe that?
Well, isn't that the way it's supposed to be? Because I mean,
No,
that's
it's not. It's not at all. In fact, I don't know why people think it's even supposed to be like that. There used to be a time when the world was on something called the gold standard, where
right.
every currency was backed and convertible to gold. Then came the World War One, the World War Two, and the US was the leading economy, and everybody realized that they are the ones who hold most of the world's gold. So then it was decided that the US would back the dollar with gold at a fixed ratio, and all other currencies in the world would back themselves with dollar or peg themselves to the dollar. Then came 1971, and the US suddenly says, look, we don't have enough gold to exchange dollars. So now we are also not going on the gold standard. And suddenly, from that day onwards, all fiat currencies in the world are backed by nothing,
Wow.
absolutely nothing. In fact, if you look at the Indian law, you will be very surprised to know that the entire Indian currency is backed by about 215 crore rupees. That's it. So while on the one hand we have thousands of crores of currency, Indian rupees, the backing as per the law is supposed to be 200 odd crores. That's it. So for all technical purposes, currency, that is why they're called fiat. Fiat means what? The dictate of the government. Nothing else. There is nothing backing it. And that's the big problem. Governments can create how much ever, and that leads to collapse. So we've seen the German currency collapse in the past. We've seen the Venezuelan currency, Zimbabwe. All these currencies we see crashing because there's no backing. Governments can print how much ever they want.
Right. It's a damn weird. So money, it has been the most universal and most efficient system of mutual trust, right, which has ever been devised. So we have accepted it, and we believe the value in the paper and the coins which is being printed by our governments. Now, blockchain as a technology is basically intrinsically it's based on transparency and equitable future. That's what blockchain says that it's going to do in the long run. But the powers that be, such as the governments, the banking industry, the centralized institutions, they would never want a decentralized world. Because a decentralized world would mean that they would lose their power or the hold over the world. So do you see fiat currencies someday be replaced by cryptocurrency, digital currency?
That's a very good question. In fact, let me give you a practical answer to this. When we talk about fiat currency, we are saying that the government creates the money. But do you know what really happens? Suppose you go to the bank and you deposit 10 rupees. Do you know that the bank can then issue a loan of 100 rupees against your 10 rupees? Because that is what we call as a fractional banking system. So in our economy, the real money is not created by the government or the RBI. It is actually created by the commercial banks. Because they have to maintain, let's say, for example, only a 10% reserve of the loans they have given out. Or so when they get 10 rupees from a customer, they can actually lend 100 rupees to people. And that is where the real creation of money happens. So we call that credit creation. Cryptocurrencies, on the other hand, you can see everything and nobody is able to do this kind of credit creation out of it. But I don't think any government will allow a cryptocurrency to replace fiat currency. Because question number one, like even if you look at Bitcoin, I would like to ask you a question. Why should we accept Bitcoin as a currency today at $30,000 and $40,000? Because that is going to unjustly enrich those people who hold on to millions of Bitcoins from day one. Why is it that they deserve to have billions of dollars coming free to them just because they happen to invent a currency? That doesn't make any sense. So that is the reason I believe, no, Bitcoin is not the answer, and the value fluctuates too much. How can we have something whose value fluctuates 20 and 30% a day to become a medium of exchange? You get your salary at 11 o'clock, and by 12 o'clock, when the time comes to pay your bills, the currency has fallen by 30%. That can't work, right? So we need to have something which is more stable. And that is where today what is happening is governments are trying to get this cryptocurrency technology and issue something called a central bank digital currency. And that is sort of the crux of what my open letter to the Prime Minister and RBI is also. That the RBI should use this technology and come out with its own INR coins on it. So it becomes like a best of both worlds, where you are taking the power of cryptocurrency technology and the benefits of fiat currency and marrying them together. And that, I believe, is the way forward.
Right. I rightfully pointed out the problem with Bitcoin is that people are hoarding it. A currency is a means of exchange, and only
Exactly.
once you are transacting, it will move forward. Some of the billionaires are inflating it by purchasing for Bitcoin, obviously. But then you pointed out the national currency. Now, China, Ecuador, Singapore, to Estonia, others, they already have their national currency. I recently read that RBI is also exploring a digital currency. Will a government run digital currency have transparency etched into its framework? And what would be its value additions compared to a fiat currency, according to you?
Sure. So now, in fact, if you realize today, most currency, like even if we talk about the Indian rupee, it's not in paper form anymore. Do you realize that? You hardly use paper. Everything is going digital.
Exactly.
So today, your INR is actually a set of balances in bank accounts.
Right.
Now, where is this information? It is in individual banks' databases. So suppose I am banking with Bank A and you are with Bank B. If you want to pay me money, it has to move from the database of your bank to the database of my bank. And this is where the friction and problem starts. That if it is across countries, it would take several days and go through multiple banks and cost a lot of money. But the moment the government start to put the currency on a single blockchain, you don't need separate databases in banks. Everybody now looks at one ledger, which we call as the blockchain. Instead of looking into the database of each individual bank, you look at one, which means money can be transferred directly by people within milliseconds at zero cost globally. And that is what somebody like Facebook is trying to do. And now I want to come to the second part of that answer. Facebook and certain companies are just moving ahead on their own. Now, let me ask you a simple question. You know, on Instagram and WhatsApp and Facebook, you can today run your own store or your own shop,
right?
Or small business.
Yes.
Now, let's say I'm a person who is, let's say, teaching people the Hindi language, and anybody in the world can come online and learn from me. And I'm promoting my business through Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. And tomorrow, Facebook gives me an opportunity to get this money in US dollars or other currencies and hold it with them. And I don't have to pay any tax because my government will never come to know about it. Would I not go for it? I think most people will go for it. And suddenly, whether the government likes it or not, Facebook is going to become one of the biggest currency issuers of the world. And that's what they're planning to do with their DM project, where they say we are going to issue these stable coins and those will integrate with their social media platforms where the whole world is. And suddenly Facebook is going to become one of the biggest creators of money. And banks can become redundant in that kind of a scenario. Right. So I don't think the question anymore is, will the government allow it? The question is, how will they stop it?
Right. You pointed out Facebook and their stablecoin DM, but somehow, if you see at this point in time, from my vantage point, I see some of these big tech companies doing more good than the governments. And they are also having more power than the governments. And somehow, if you see, most of the policy or the frameworks are being designed by these tech behemoths. I don't know whether how good that is for global good, but I don't even know how good it is when there is a polarizing government creating policy frameworks for a certain section of society. I would want to see a world which is more open, more transparent. Will we ever, break away from these centralized governments, these banking industries? Will the common man ever be free from the clutches of the powers of the centralized power? Will blockchain play a role in creating an equitable future for all?
So blockchain from a technology point of view, it basically is brilliant in the respect of it gives you a lot of transparency and provable immutability, which means you can actually prove in a court of law that it has not been tampered with. But
Exactly.
your broader question is that no, a technology cannot solve this problem. Because when we talk about polarization, I don't think we can blame governments for it. We have to blame ourselves because we want those governments. We don't accept everyone to be the same. There is that distinction between people on caste, color, religion, language, and I don't think blockchain can help us in that. We need to change the way we think. Blockchain as a technology, there are 100 other technologies available which can give you the best transparency possible in government. But do you actually want it? When you go out to vote, do you actually consider the overall benefit of the country, or do you consider issues like caste, color, language, religion, and other issues? So till that changes, no, I don't think anything is ever going to change. It's up to us, right? Do we actually want the change? But on the other hand, things are already changing in one way. If you realize today, if you spend most of your waking hours in the digital world, where do you even see the concept of country anymore? When you're on a social media platform, you are getting content based on hashtags or based on topics, no longer based on country. You don't even know who you are dealing with. In fact, right now, you and I are having a conversation, but honestly, we don't even know where we are based. I don't know where you're sitting, you don't know where I'm sitting, and it doesn't matter to us, right? So, this whole video conferencing, thanks to the COVID virus, has made this distinction between countries quite redundant in a lot of respects.
Right. So I'm excited for that world where everything gets democratized. And I feel that technology is playing a deeper role in that, because you pointed out, thanks to technology, it's given us this channel. We could be sitting in any part of the world, but we can converse. It's given this opportunity for anybody with a desire and intent, whether he's sitting in an urban area or a rural area. If he's got connectivity, internet, and the desire and intent, he or she can create businesses. So I'm excited for the world which could be more democratized. And somehow I see, just because maybe the nature of blockchain, because of its decentralized nature, I am possibly in awe of that technology. I do understand that there is so many other things which is coming together, but just because the nature of the technology, because there's no other technology which gives you complete transparency, because most of the technology at this point in time is underpinned somehow with surveillance tech. Most of the technology, right from artificial intelligence to augmented reality, virtual reality, everything. But blockchain says, okay, we are going to create a decentralized world. We are going to take the middlemen out of the picture. So that's what is exciting. Now for blockchain as a framework and Bitcoin, there are this lot of people who kind of there's a lot of misunderstanding, because people associate Bitcoin with blockchain, that there's a cryptocurrency, ICO scam and stuff like that. So could you kind of like shine that light on that, explain to my audience about cryptocurrency, ICOs, Bitcoin, blockchain?
Sure. So see, frauds take place everywhere. I mean, even in the normal non-crypto world, you have frauds all the time. You have a Vijay Mallya running off with huge amounts of debt and a Nirav Modi running off. They didn't use cryptocurrencies to do their scams, right? So scams will happen all the time. That's not going to change. Does cryptocurrency make it easier to do? I actually say no, it doesn't actually make it any easier. What you must realize is that whenever you invest your money, you have to understand what you're doing. So as a common man, the government realizes that common people don't understand too much about the share market. So they very highly regulate it. They do a lot of checks and balances before a company can issue shares. They do a lot of checks and balances before mutual funds are set up. So unfortunately for the government, they cannot carry out that same level of due diligence in the cryptocurrency world. So when a person who does not have the adequate knowledge moves into that direction, that is where he loses money. I once remember meeting somebody a few years ago, very old gentleman he came to me and said, I have invested my entire provident fund and my wife's provident fund into Bitcoin. And now I have these numbers. What do I do with them? And I was horrified. He did not understand what a Bitcoin address or a private key means, but he has put his entire life's earnings into it because he was hearing that it's going up in price. Now, if that gentleman still holds on to the Bitcoin, today he would be like almost a billionaire. But the problem is he didn't even know how to secure it. So it would have been very easy for someone to hack him and steal all that away. When it comes to bank money, there are agencies in place who can reverse the transaction. Your money can come back to you. There is the police which can do something. But when it comes to crypto and somebody in somewhere in the world hacks in and takes your money away, nobody can return it to you. And that is why it is essential for people to understand a lot of technical concepts before they put their money into crypto. And once you do that, you will realize crypto is actually a safer place, because you're actually able to see what is happening with the tokens that you have bought and how they are being utilized. It actually becomes easier if you know what you're doing.
From my perspective, I see that where we are going with maybe the technology such as blockchain and cryptocurrency, we could go in a better direction rather than a decentralized kind of space. So, can we talk about some of peers' works that excites you the most? Who amongst your peers you see are creating some really groundbreaking work in the blockchain industry in this context?
Sure. So when I look at it, there are lots of very exciting projects out there. So for example, there is something called the BAT, which is called the Basic Attention Token. And their logic is, why should people not be paid for their attention? Which means if you are looking at a particular website, you should be paid some money for it. And the person running the website should be easier for him to make more money from his content. So they came out with this brilliant concept of a browser called the Brave browser, and with that a cryptocurrency attached to it called the BAT, and that enables content creators like you and me to very easily monetize what we are doing. So anybody browsing our website or video can click a button and give us a tip, which could be a very small amount of money also. So that is one project that I find really exciting. Then there is another company which is enabling sports fans to make democratic decisions about their sports teams. So you are in effect actually buying a part of your sports team or getting a say into what their uniform should look like, what they should be doing. And that's very empowering for a lot of sports fans. So actually, when you look at crypto, the best way to start is look at the industries that you care about. And then you will be amazed to find so many people doing a great job. Today, there are more than 8,000 publicly traded cryptocurrencies. 8,000. And they are in all areas. So some of them are doing really great work in decentralized finance, some in sports, some in content monetization. There are hundreds of them which are doing a really good job. So it's very difficult to pinpoint a few, but there are lots and lots of them.
Right. So even I'm using Brave browser, and
that's very nice.
And so it's a super awesome thing, because you spoke about the content creators. Forever, I think the middleman have sucked out the life of content creators. Because artists, they create fantastic music, fantastic movies, and they end up in the dumps, when they are old, because it's always their manager or someone who's sucking the life out of them. So a technology like this, maybe so that's the reason. Possibly, maybe I was trying to stress on. I'm excited about what this technology can do. So I had recently seen a letter which you had drafted on blockchain, an open letter on LinkedIn. So could you talk a little bit more about that on the adoption of blockchain?
So what my vision or what my thought process is that today as an Indian, I have far too many numbers. I have an Aadhaar number, a PAN number, a TAN number, a passport number, a driving license number. I mean, it's an unlimited number. So my first point is, why can't I just have one single number? Let's say that is my Aadhaar number and everything is linked to that. So if say the government of India sets up this blockchain, now this will be a private blockchain operated only by the government. We have about 700 plus districts in our country. So you can put nodes in each of them. And after that, every single Indian should have one address on that and no separate bank accounts. So I cannot now hide my money anywhere. And the government should demonetize all currency other than notes of 100 and below, so that the poor people who cannot have this technology, they can use the cheaper currency notes of 100, 50, 20, 10 or coins. But above that, all transactions should compulsorily become digital. Everybody has only one account, which is his Aadhaar account linked to it, to the government blockchain. We don't need banks anymore in that scenario for payments. Payments will directly move from one Indian to another Indian on that blockchain. Everything is monitored. Now, suppose I was a criminal. How would I hide my money? Suppose I was a corrupt official. How would I hide my money? There would be no way for me to hide it because all my property would be attached to that Aadhaar number. if I want to default on a loan, I cannot default on a loan because my loan is also linked to that one number. And the moment my EMI becomes payable and I don't have that much liquid balance, the blockchain will be able to liquidate my assets and pay my loan installment on time. So I believe, of course, this cannot happen so fast. It will take decades for it to go through. But if we start moving in that direction, it could actually be a utopian world where you could reduce crime to a great extent, you could reduce frauds and tax evasion to almost 100%, and a phenomenal level of transparency.
Right.
I think it's doable.
Right. How secure or tamper-proof blockchain is, and what are the chances of a nation with the holding the technology to tamper around with something like that for its own personal greed or motivation?
Sure. So, in fact, I'm very happy to say that one of the dreams in my open letter is already coming through because the government of India is working on using blockchain during elections. So, what they're saying is that those people who are not in the city where they're registered as a voter, a lot of people today travel for work. You can actually go in whichever city you are, and there will be a specific booth there where you can go and vote, and your vote goes onto a blockchain. So, I'm very excited to hear that the Election Commission and IIT Madras are working on this. So they are actually moving into that direction. Now, coming back to your question of how secure it is, I will be honest. Whatever technology we can create, well, somebody can break it also. And when it is broken, you just secure it and you just move forward. So I'm sure, and in the past, blockchains have been hacked. It's not like they haven't. But every time it gets hacked, you patch it, you secure it, and you keep running it. When somebody hacks it again, you again fix it and move forward. See, we have had locks on our doors for centuries. But does it mean thieves don't enter homes? They do, right? We just buy better locks. So blockchain can be hacked, but it's just like any other technology. Nothing in the world is unhackable.
Right. So you are the co-founder of the Asian School of Cyber Laws, and you've been handling cyber crime and data breaches, and that happens to be your expertise on that. So COVID has thrusted us all into a digital world. Most of the emerging tech is underpinned on surveillance tech, which I've said earlier also. Right from since I've been invested in the augmented reality, virtual reality space. We are now creating these wearable devices, the glasses, which might look something like this, which is going to converge, maybe your computer and your phone into one single wearable device. Where when you wear that, the head-mounted display, and you walk around, it's going to capture all the data, whatever you're looking at. So Yuval Noah Harari, he expressed concern on the future that we are getting into because of technology and how we could get into a totalitarian world, right? So my first question, are we prepared to defend and safeguard ourselves from cyber attacks? And what is the role of blockchain over there? And second question, in the guise of security, will our personal and private lives will forever be lost in a post-COVID world?
That's a good question. See, I have a slightly contrary view here. I don't think people care about privacy. Some people like to talk about it. The media loves to talk about it, but common people don't care. I'll be very honest with you. Do you, or even if you ask yourself, do you really care how much of your data Facebook uses to try to sell stuff to you? See, everybody is trying to sell stuff to me anyway all the time. I put on TV and somebody's trying to advertise to me. So at least Facebook targets and shows me ads which I'm more likely to enjoy. And I'm happy using free services like WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram. And in return, if they are able to use my data to make some money for themselves, I don't really care. In fact, I'm a capitalist here. And I believe, why don't you just buy shares in Facebook? Or buy shares in Amazon and all these Google and other platforms? Because yes, they are going to rule the world. And do we really care about privacy? No, but if somebody puts a hidden camera in my house and then records me or the women of my house, that is a problem. Now, that is a crime which is covered by various laws. And yes, that level of privacy everybody would expect and should get. But that is not what a Facebook is ever going to do to you. That is what a criminal would do to you. So when we look at it from that point of view, yes, the crimes are going up. But I believe most of the time people end up losing their money is because of ignorance. When the banks have put in brilliant systems in place, you are not supposed to pay money without an OTP or a one-time password which comes to you by SMS. But if somebody gives you a phone call and fools you into giving that number to them, would you actually call it a breach of security? No. It's a mistake by a human being who's not trained or who doesn't take it that seriously. So, as far as security technology is considered, it's very good. It is almost always a fault of human beings that people end up losing their money. If they start to be more careful and they start to actually understand what they're doing, I don't think most of these crimes would happen. I think it's primarily because of the human being. And this has always been the case. I remember giving my first lecture on something like this in 1999. And at that time, I said phishing is one of the easiest ways in which people can steal money from you or cause a damage. It is 2021. 22 years later, I am still saying the same thing, that phishing is the biggest problem. And why does it happen? Because people don't know how to identify a fake website from a real one or a fake email from a real one. And that's the reason for the last 22 years people fall for it. So, whose fault is it? Is it the technology's fault or people's fault?
Right, right. So you mentioned about our data being hoarded by Facebook and basically almost all of the big companies. So I'm being a technologist. I mean, the reason I'm doing the podcast is because I feel that I need to create awareness. Or do we really care? Attitude, I believe, will create a huge problem for us. Because we are in the world where what is going to become more important or more valuable is going to be our data. We are
Mhm.
getting into a world where our data is being hoarded, it's being manipulated, and things like even elections are being manipulated. And this is the start of things to come. We are in a world where uh, machine intelligence or artificial intelligence is in such a narrow space, but it is already capable of manipulating us, hacking us in ways we do not even understand. For example, I'll give you one simple example. Most of the phones, I mean, apps we have today, not just record or location data, it also records our voice. How long are we going to be okay with things like that? Like, for example, I said, I mean, in another few years, because I'm vested in augmented reality, virtual reality, we will actually have glasses like this, which will be our computer and our mobile. Now,
Yeah, like Google Glass, like what Google came out with
yeah,
Google
yeah, yeah.
Glass. Yeah.
That was. I mean, long time back, we have come to a point where we have already created glasses, which is intelligent, which reads up, which can look at whatever we're looking. So we, because of COVID, because of our careless nature, like what do we care attitude, we have anyway been thrusted in the COVID world where every step that we take is going to be looked at, and we have given the permissions because we don't care, right? But
Maybe
this,
you don't care.
yeah. So this could create a world, a totalitarian world where a government like China, it's already happening, and and I think it's the choices that we make today will create a future. So I do advocate that we need to be very safe on what we do with the data, because the most important thing in today's world and going forward is our data. And I really want my data to be mine and only mine. And if somebody else wants to use my data, I want them to take permission about using my data or leveraging my data for creating business. And I believe that blockchain could play a role in data ownership. So anyway, you are the founder of Prime Chain Technologies, and you are also the founder of Mera QR. So could you talk about maybe your journey as someone who's been vested in blockchain, and being one of the front runners into this technology, and what exactly is you doing or building with Mera QR and Prime Chain Technologies?
Sure. So I actually started off with Asian School of Cyber Laws in 1999, and there we focused on cybercrime and cybersecurity. So we did a lot of cybercrime investigations in about 18 plus countries. And very interestingly, the first time I heard was of Bitcoin was when I was helping one of the government departments investigate a case of the drug mafia using Bitcoins for payment. And that was the first time I actually heard of that. Then I researched deeper into the technology and my mind was blown with the possibilities. And that's what actually then made me shift my focus into blockchain. And there in Prime Chain, what we started off was to help banks leverage this blockchain technology and make solutions like digital identity, KYC, cross border remittances, and all. Now, over the last few years, the way I've seen it is that while blockchain definitely has a lot of good use cases, I have come to realize that the number one use case of blockchain is the reason for which it was invented, and that is cryptocurrencies. That is what it was made for, and I believe that's where the real use cases lie. Everything else is partly useful, but doesn't really strike the nail on the head properly. So the way I look at it now, the way forward for blockchain is primarily in crypto and what we today call as decentralized finance, where we will be able to move share markets onto blockchains, the foreign exchange onto it, and things can start to happen without the middleman or the intermediary. And you know what? That is the biggest problem also. Because today, when you try to sell blockchain technology to a bank and you tell the bank that blockchain is supposed to kill you, why would the bank want it? So
Exactly.
the way in which people are going around selling blockchain is wrong. If you keep harping on the fact that it is going to kill the intermediary, well, then the intermediary is not going to use it. And if he doesn't use it, who is going to pay you for it, right? So if the stock exchanges, the banks, and all these intermediaries which control finance, if they feel that this is going to kill them, they are not going to use it and nobody's going to buy it. And that is why the one use case which they cannot stop is crypto. Because here you don't need them anymore. You don't have to go to a bank and sell a crypto platform. You start your own currency. Who's stopping you? And that is why I see that as the number one use case. Blockchain was invented for decentralized finance and money, and that is the real true use case. Everything else is a stretch. I
Right.
know I shouldn't be making a statement like this, considering that I come from from the blockchain industry, but that's the truth, and most of us know that. We
Right.
just
Yeah.
don't say it.
Exactly. So yes, my podcast is all about people opening up and opening their heart and mouth and saying the truth the way it is, because uh, we we have been thrust into a world where finally the common man will be able to break away the shackles, because forever the common man has been ruled and exploited. And somehow, going back to my earlier point, I was saying technology is that tool. If we leverage, if only we leverage it by knowing its true potential and giving it respect. For example, like I said, I mean, it's given us the opportunity for two people sitting I mean, we're not so far away, but in technology, the tool which gives you that opportunity to converse with anyone around the world, create businesses, and internet is that the biggest teacher in the world. There is so much education which is already available free, but then we are conning people in the name of education and scamming people when the entire education or repository of education is available free online in the form of massive open online courses and continuous podcasts and videos and research papers. But we are so used to the traditional format, we are so stuck with it, we're so stuck with the we are okay with the normal, and that I believe is about to kind of change, and technology is kind of doing that. Technology, the tool, whether it's blockchain, whether it's artificial intelligence, whether it's augmented reality, virtual reality, if we choose it correctly, it will help us create a better society and a better world. And that's the only reason I'm doing what I'm doing. So what are your predictions for blockchain for 2021 and for this coming decade?
So I believe that 2021 to 2030 is going to be the decade of decentralized finance, which means we are going to see all the centralized financial concepts, whether it is the stock market, whether it is insurance, whether it is the banking system, completely moving to a decentralized blockchain based concept. And which is why I'm very happy to say that the US government just earlier this month has given an official approval to banks in the US to become node operators of public blockchains also. And they are allowing banks to now start to use stable coins and other such crypto currencies. And that I believe is the way forward. Where we need to realize that, look, whether you like it or not, cryptocurrencies and decentralized finance are here to stay. They are not going anywhere. So it is better for intermediaries to agree to change their business model a little bit and actually start leveraging this. I still believe there are very good opportunities for banks to still leverage cryptocurrencies if they stop looking at it as an enemy. They have to realize it's here for good. You just have to realize what to do with it. In fact, I'll give you a very simple example. You know, in India, when we used to go to the railway stations, you always used to see a lot of coolies. You know, those guys in those red kurta. Do you see them anymore?
Right, they all disappeared, right?
What made them disappear? It was the VIP company which came out and put wheels on suitcases.
Right.
The day they put wheels on suitcases, they killed a lot of the coolie business. But what can the coolie do? The coolie couldn't do anything because people were going to use those wheels on their suitcases. Similarly, cryptocurrencies are here. Banks cannot stop them. The only thing they can do is try to leverage it and not try to fight it.
Lovely, lovely. What note to end on? So yes, I mean that's such a beautiful case. I mean it's not beautiful in any terms that a certain section of people lost their jobs, but I think that's the nature of life. I mean, the coolies lost their jobs because of VIPs innovation. They came up with bags with wheels, and so many livelihoods were lost. But I'm sure that kind of forced them to relook at their profession.
Exactly. Yeah.
And maybe look at another opportunity. The same thing.
You have to adapt and reinvent. You have to adapt and reinvent yourself. Yeah?
Exactly.
So that's what everyone needs to do.
That is exactly what is happening. We have been thrusted into this world, and because of COVID, suddenly there's this huge lens on emerging technology. And I believe in the next 10 years, everything or every traditional running industry is going to get disrupted, whether they like it or whether they don't. This is the time to look at technology such as blockchain, artificial intelligence, and others, adapt, because we are getting into a world where it's going to be very beautiful if we take the right choice. So I'm going to just talk about maybe delve on that a little bit, what I said earlier, that we're getting into a world which is going to be more automated. Jobs are going to be lost. People are going to lose jobs because machines are going to take away. I'm not talking about like the next 5 years. I'm talking about the 10, 15 years, because this is an inevitable future. In that world where people are jobless, maybe blockchain and Bitcoin and these technology or barter and universal basic income could get more important. And I'm very excited about blockchain as a technology. Bitcoin, obviously, you pointed out, it has got its problem because people are hoarding it. When you start transacting it, then I think all of these technologies which will become more prominent and will get more mass adopted. So I'm really looking forward for blockchain as a technology to create transformation and to create a world which is more transparent, where the middlemen are finally taken out and where the power goes back to the people. So I'm really excited about that. So any last notes?
Yeah, I'd like to actually mention, in blockchain, you don't remove the middleman, you change the middleman. So, for all talks of Bitcoin being decentralized, if the miners and people like me who run full nodes, if we step away, Bitcoin shuts down. So all that is achieved by Bitcoin is, instead of banks being the middleman, miners and node operators become the middlemen. But please realize the middlemen are never going to go away. They're
Right,
just
but-
going to change.
but the unlike the centralized institutions like the banking industry, and they are not going to be blood sucking where they're going to take that huge chunk. Maybe the percentage will be something which will be more okay for the common man. So on that note,
Let's hope so.
Yeah.
Let's hope so. Let's hope so.
It was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for your
My
insights. It was a really fun conversation. And I'm really sure even my listeners would like this. So my listeners, if you like what you see in here, please press the subscribe button. Until next time, see you guys. Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.